Okay, this is lesson 2.4, which is on page 66 of your math book. And we're talking about multiplying and dividing rational numbers. So when we're multiplying and dividing rational numbers, use the same rules for signs as you did for integers. So same sign will make it positive, different signs will make it negative. So that's it. You do have to remember that when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply across the top, you multiply across the bottom. When you're dividing fractions, don't forget, you turn it into a multiplication. You keep the first fraction the same, you make it multiply instead of divide, and you write the reciprocal or flip over the second fraction. So negative 1/2 divided by 4/9 becomes negative 1/2 times 9 over 4. And then you just multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. Remember that when we're multiplying with decimals, you multiply as if the decimals were not there. And then when you're all done, 2 numbers behind the decimal in the problem means you'll have 2 numbers behind the decimal in the answer. That's pretty much it. Go to the practice problems. And now here are some problems that we'll work on. Okay, working through this on your own problems. The first one, negative 6/5 divided by negative 1/2. So remember, we turn it into multiplication. Negative 6/5 stayed the same, times, and then we invert this fraction so it's negative 2 over 1. Multiplying across the top, 6 times 2 is 12, 5 times 1 is 5, and I look back, both negatives, same sign, positive. And I am going to turn this into the mixed number. Although I would accept 12 over 5, it equals 2 2/5. For number 2, another division, 1/3 divided by negative 2 2/3. Well, the first thing I did was turn them both into fractions. 1/3 divided by negative 8/3. Remember, 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. For the numerator, denominator stays the same. And now, 1/3 times turn it into multiply, and I inverted this fraction. So instead of negative 8 over 3, now it's negative 3 over 8. Now I did simplify before I multiplied. 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 3 once. Now I can just multiply across the top. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 8 is 8. Now I did have one of each, a positive and a negative, which makes my answer negative. Getting into the decimals, 1.8 times negative 5.1. So I line them up to multiply like this. I ignore the decimals, do my multiplication, and then 2 numbers behind the decimal means 2 numbers behind the decimal in my answer. There was one of each back in the original problem, a positive and a negative, which means my answer will be a negative 9 18/100. For number 4, more decimals. Negative 6.3 times negative 0.6. I multiply as if there were no decimals. When I'm all done, 2 numbers behind the decimal means 2 numbers behind the decimal. And a negative and a negative, so same sign. My answer is positive 3 78/100. Here I have 3 factors I'm multiplying together. Negative 2/3 times 7 7/8 times 3 halves. I write them all as fractions, which means 7 7/8 becomes 63/8. 8 times 7 is 56, plus 7 is 63. Then I simplified before I multiplied, and 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 3 once. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once. That made this pretty easy. 1 times 63 times 1 is just 63. 1 times 8 times 1 is just 8. There was an odd number of negatives, so my answer is negative. I did turn it back into a mixed number, negative 7 7/8. And finally, again, 3 factors, decimals this time. So I multiplied 7.2 times 0.1 right here. I multiply and I ignore the decimals. And then I have 2 numbers behind the decimals, so 2 numbers behind the decimal, 0.72. I take that 0.72 and I multiply by my last factor of 100. And I get 72 because 2 numbers behind the decimal, 2 numbers behind the decimal. Those are useless, so it's just 72. an even number of negatives, so my answer is positive, positive 72. Okay, when you're working out the problems for this lesson 2.4, the problems we're going to work out are 7 through 30, which are all found on page 68. But I'm going to have two different videos out there, and one of them will be, the first video is problems 7 through 9 and 22 through 30. These are all of the multiplication problems. And then the second video is problems 10 through 21, which will be the division problems. So when I put the problems up on this video, I'm going to put 7 through 9 and then 22 through 30. Then I'm going to put 10 through 21. So they're going to go a little out of order, but that's to match the two other videos that are found here.